So that's a major difference. You have an overly transcendental God that can't relate to human beings.
He's not a man, nor does he have any partners in association.
Okay, so you can see here there is some apologetics inserted. Everything they just described about God we agree with, but then they say, no, he's not a man, and they're showing a picture of Jesus, right? That's specifically polemic against Christianity, right? Now, I would challenge, we don't believe that God is a man. We believe that the second person of the Trinity, the Son, entered into his own creation, chose to enter into his own creation out of his own volition, and in doing so retains his godhood, but is also 100% man at the same time. He is 100% man and he's 100% God.
He's on his own. And no, he did not ever.
He's on his own. We believe in monotheism. Christians are monotheists. In fact, I recently preached a sermon on the essentials of godliness, and I noted that monotheism is one of the essentials of having a proper worldview. We are monotheists. We do not believe in multiple gods. So when he says that he is alone, if you're referring to the being of God, we agree. But if we're talking about the level of personhood, then God is three persons in one being. This is a big distinction between Christians and Muslims, and this, I would say, is important. The God of Islam, as is being described here, is transcendent above all things, and as such, I struggle to see how that God can relate with us as human beings. I think this is a benefit of Christian Trinitarianism, that our God actually has relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and that relational God reflects human beings who are also relational. One of my critiques of the God of Islam, and I'll just use Allah for shorthand, one of the difficulties with it is that that God does not resonate with us as human beings like the Trinitarian God of the Bible does. It's not a logical argument. It's more an appeal to our nature and the nature of the world. I differ on the issue of who God is. The God of Islam is so transcendental. You say God is all-knowing, he can already relate to us. Just because you know all things doesn't mean you know what it's like to be human. Just because you know all things doesn't mean you've walked on the earth as a man. And yet the God of Christianity did that and the God of Islam didn't. We do not have a God who can't sympathize with our weaknesses, but he was tempted in all ways just as we are, yet without sin. He didn't fail at those points. So that's a major difference. You have an overly transcendental God that can't relate to human beings. And that this is a truth about Christianity that Islam doesn't have. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, obviously speaking of Jesus, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. Why should we hold firmly? For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. Islam has a high priest, if you want to use that language, that is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. Islam's high priest, Allah, is unable to empathize with our weaknesses because he is transcendental God. The point I'm making about sympathy or empathy is not that he has information. Yeah, Allah has all the information, of course, right? But it's, has he walked as we walk? Does Allah know what it's like to be tempted? Does he even know what that's like? No, not according to the Quran. And so Allah puts us upon an earth and causes us to be tempted and to stumble and to struggle and all of these things, and then judges us for it. And he has no clue what that is even like. He's never experienced it. He's never walked through it. He's never experienced that temptation himself. That's a big difference, and it makes a difference. Instead, what does the Bible say? For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. To me, that's amazingly different. God chooses to enter into his own creation. He sees our plight. He sees our difficulty. He sees how difficult temptation is. The video talked all the time about money, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that type of stuff. He sees us struggling through that. And Jesus enters into his own creation and says, I'm going to experience this right alongside of them. And yet he is victorious where we failed. And it's on that basis that I can stand before God on Judgment Day, because he has lived the life I couldn't live, and he died the death in my place that I deserved to die. So that's what I mean when I say the word sympathy. We do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses. He walked on earth as a man. He knows what it's like to be tempted. Allah does not. No, it says God created us with desire and created us with Satan and him whispering. He created us imperfect and he will not judge us harshly and will forgive us because he put obstacles in our way and understands what we go through. He doesn't understand what we go through. He tells us what to do and what not to do, but he doesn't actually understand what we go through because he's never experienced it. Allah hasn't ever suffered any temptation. He doesn't know what it's like to struggle with those things. Jesus does. It's one thing to know a fact. It's another thing to know intimately. Let me put it this way. The Bible uses this language. I don't know if the Quran does. The Bible uses to know to talk about sexual intimacy between married couples. Adam knew his wife. In that way, that's a knowing that is a little different than just information. You say God knows everything, so he knows the emotions we go through. But there's a difference between knowing information and walking through life and knowing something through experience. I can know all sorts of information about how to build a rocket, for example. But I have quite a different knowledge if I've actually built a rocket. You can read information out of a textbook, but then you go and do it, and it's very different. You can study football and how to play football, but there's a difference between reading a book on football, studying film about football, and actually playing the game. Allah knows information like a textbook, but he does not know what it's like to actually live in that manner. Jesus is different, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Jesus knows, truly, intimately knows what it's like to walk around in a human body and experience human feelings and emotions and temptations. He knows. Allah doesn't. Hey guys, Pastor Channer here. Thanks for swinging by. Hope you liked that video, and if you did, would you mind hitting the like and subscribe buttons down below? More than that, if you head down to the description, you can see links to both our Twitch and our Discord. We would love to interact with you more live, so if you'd like to catch us there, that would be great. Anyway, I hope you're doing well. Take care. God bless. Bye now.